my name is Cliff, and let me sort of introduce myself with a purpose. I have a reason for doing it this way. I do a number of things. Full disclosure, I am 62 years old. I know I look it. But I'm doing a number of things with my life right now, and let's talk about those for a second. Let's get the bad one out of the way first of all. There's always a bad one. I am by training and education, although I assure you not by temperament, a lawyer. A lawyer who's going to help you manage your career better. Kill me now. Seriously, does it get any worse than that? But I'm not your usual kind of lawyer. I don't do wills, I don't do divorces. You will never see my face plastered on the side of a city bus anywhere. It's not going to hurt in an accident, call 1-800-CLIFF. It's not going to happen. I only work with small businesses. That's all I do. I help people start them, I help them run and manage them, and I've been doing it now for 35 years of my life. And I've worked with somewhere between 15 and 20,000 people who have started businesses of their own. Everything from one-person consulting firms to some companies that are today on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private corporations in America. I'm very happy to say I got some of those guys started years ago, back in the day. But I'm not just a lawyer. I'm also a successful entrepreneur. Back in the late 1980s, I started a desktop publishing company. Does anybody remember that? When desktop publishing was new. But before we had all this media and the selfies and all that kind of stuff, I was doing books out of my spare bedroom in 1988, which was a very weird experience. It was a company called Bienix Corporation, Bienix Press, which I guarantee you've never heard of unless, do we have any lawyers in the room? Any people who are lawyers or whatever? If you were a lawyer, you might have heard of us because we were the first company that did career information for lawyers. Believe it or not, back in the late 80s, no one was telling lawyers how to manage their careers better. There were certainly law book companies, teaching them how to practice law, but nobody was telling them things like how to interview for a legal job. What specialty should you go in? Are you a big firm person, a small firm person? Nobody was doing anything like that. And I saw an opportunity, so I started a company with two partners, who I subsequently bought out, to do this, and we did pretty well. In the year 2000, right at the turn of the millennium, we did about $3.5 million in sales. We did books, remember the audio cassette programs, the ones in the plastic binders, remember those? We used to do those. Seminars at law schools and bar associations. We actually had a program called People Skills for Lawyers, believe it or not. Can you believe that? Teaching lawyers personalities, skills, and stuff like that. You think you got a weird idea for a businessman, trust me, I can beat anything you got with that. But we did pretty well. In 2004, I sold my company to Thomson Reuters. You may know that Thomson West is one of the biggest, one of their affiliates is the biggest legal publisher in the world. And as part of that sale, I took a consulting gig with them where I periodically work on career-oriented projects for their legal division. These days, it's not so much books or tapes, it's more things like interactive software programs and things like that, asynchronous interviewing, stuff like that. What they do is they hand the project off to me, and I basically develop it for them. I don't write the code, I'm not that good, but I do the architecture, the flow charting, the help screens, the content stuff. That's what I do. I hand them a turnkey project at the end of the day. The technical term for that is a packager in publishing, but think of it as a consultant. Okay, so what have I got so far? I've got lawyer, successful entrepreneur, publishing industry consultant. Think of me that way. And I charge by the hour for that, by the way. I am an author. I have 15, 16 books in print. I got a new one coming out this spring on crowdfunding your company, how to raise money for your company using crowdfunding. It's going to come out in April of this year. I got 16 others. If you go to Amazon and type in Cliff Ennico, I always go by Cliff, never Clifford, you can see all the stuff that I've written. I have a nationally syndicated newspaper column. It's called Succeeding in Your Business. It's basically an Ann Landers for people who run their own businesses. People email me their crazy questions, and either I answer them or I get somebody who knows what they're talking about to answer the question. I have a lot of fun with that. I have a relationship with eBay. Twice a year, eBay sends me around the country talking to their sellers on the legal and tax issues involved in selling online. There are a lot of people out there selling stuff on eBay and Amazon who don't know they have to pay taxes. Basically, my job is to scare them into doing the right thing. Most people usually need liquor during one of my presentations. Actually, I've had people faint during that program because they don't realize that they had to pay taxes before. It's a lot of fun to watch that, actually, that kind of thing. I'm a lawyer. What can I tell you? I mean, I get my kicks and stuff like that anyway. But the eBay thing keeps me pretty busy. At any given time, I'm speaking to about 30 or 40 organizations a year on various topics. I have a very interesting hobby. I collect antique mechanical banks. Does anybody remember what those used to be? They came out between like 1880 and about 1920. They were cast iron banks, and they were designed to teach kids that thrift could be fun. What the bank would do is it would reproduce a scene, and then what you would do is you would put your penny in, and the penny would do something cute to deposit the bank. So, for example, one of the most popular is the William Tell Bank. Remember William Tell shot the apple off his kid's head? You know, remember that? So it's a reproduction of that scene. There's this gorgeous castle, which is, of course, that's where the money goes. Then you have William Tell, this gorgeous, Renaissance garb. He's got his crossbow. The kid's there with the apple on a hinge. And basically what you do is you put your penny in the bank. You have to use Indian head pennies, by the way. Those of you who have these at home, never use Lincoln head pennies with an antique mechanical bank. They were meant for the Indian head pennies, and this Lincoln heads have a different specific gravity. You will wear out the mechanism over time if you use a Lincoln head bank. So you got to know about this stuff, okay? So you do the thing, you put your penny in William Tell's crossbow, it's on a spring, it clicks, you hit the button, he shoots the penny hits the apple on the kid's head, goes into the tower, and the kid spins around like that a couple of times. If you truly hate children, this is the toy for you. Absolutely. It's just so much fun to do that over and over and over again. Look, I'm a lawyer. It doesn't take me much to get me excited, okay? Just give me a mechanical bank, some Indian head pennies, and I'm good for a couple of days. I'm easily entertained, all right? But I am a leading collector. This year, I am the secretary of the Mechanical Bank Collectors Society of North America, based in Philadelphia. We have 35,000 members in 72 countries around the globe with an average net worth of $20 million. By the way, poor people do not collect antique mechanical banks. Lesson, if you want to network with the 1%, you want to network with millionaires and billionaires, find out what their hobbies are. That's one way to get to those people. The other way is to get involved in the same charities that they do, if that's part of your game plan, if part of your networking plan. Okay, so that's my hobby. I am a landlord. I own a couple of 2-3 family homes here in the greater Bridgeport area that I lease mostly to college students, but I don't do any of the landlording stuff myself. I have a relationship with a project management firm. I do their leases for nothing, and they help clean up the properties after the kids have their wild parties on Saturday night. I think I got the better part of that deal. I had a TV show for about 10 years, from 1994 to 2003. It was called Money Hunt. It was the very first Shark Tank type show for entrepreneurs. People would come on, we would go through their business plan, and then what we would do is, we were a little different than Shark Tank. The first half of the show, we would find this entrepreneur with a truly crazy idea. My partner and I, a guy named Miles, we would go through their business plan, and then during the second half of the show, from behind a curtain, we would bring the Money Hunt mentor. This was a leading figure in that entrepreneur's industry. So we had Jerry Yang, the founder of Yahoo, was on our show a couple of times. Debbie Fields from Mrs. Fields Cookies. We had some incredible people on the show as mentors. Can you imagine that? You got this little crazy software product, and you're in Twin Falls, Idaho. You're coming on national television, and there's somebody from Microsoft who has not only read your business plan but thinks it's awful. And that was the show, basically. A little bit more. It was PBS, so we had to be a little more highbrow than Shark Tank could be, but it was still the same basic concept. And I did that for 10 years, and I still do a number of things that are kind of tied to that Money Hunt brand. So what am I up to now? Like 10 things, about? I probably forgot a couple, too. Why am I boring you with this, by the way? Why am I doing this long-winded introduction? The answer is, it's not just because of ego at all, although I'm very proud that I do all these things. I'm doing this for a very simple reason. I am probably the best example that I can think of. What I've just been describing to you for the last couple of minutes is exactly what your career is someday going to look like. Okay, all of these things that I've been boring you with have one thing in common. What is it? They all, go ahead.
It's you.
Well, it's me, but what do they all have in common? What do they bring to my doorstep? Money. I don't do these for free. These aren't hobbies. Everything that I do, that I've just been describing, makes money. in some way or another. Some more, some less, but everything that I'm doing right now drives revenue to the bottom line. Even the mechanical banks do, by the way. Every once in a while, an auction house will send me a bank for evaluation purposes, and I charge for that. For looking at the bank, making sure it hasn't been repainted, that it's not more than X% rust, that kind of thing. Sometimes I have to clean them sometimes, and I charge for that. I'm also putting together a coffee table book on the best examples of the 420 known mechanical banks that were made in the US and Britain. It's going to be for one of the art house publishers. It's going to be a coffee table book with the best examples of each of these 420 banks, and we expect to make money off of that. So all these things, you've read about multiple streams of revenue, you've read about multiple streams of income, but I have a better term for it. I call this, what I do, a train wreck. No, I call it a portfolio career. You might want to write this down, because there are other people who use the term. It's not just me. All of you, I'm sure, have had a chance to work with a broker or a financial advisor, investment advisor, right? Somebody like that. What's the first piece of advice they give you about managing your investments? Diversify, absolutely. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your things in company stock. Have some real estate, have some gold, do all that. It's great strategy for managing your investments, but it is also, and you are hearing this for the first time tonight, the best way to manage your career as well. The best way to manage your career. All of these things that I talked about are driving money to my bottom line, okay? What are the odds that they're all going to disappear overnight? And I'm going to be left, floundering without money to pay my next mortgage payment? It's not going to happen. Statistically impossible. Oh, I may lose one down the road. Something may disappear. eBay may decide one day they don't like me anymore because I'm scaring the crap out of their sellers. Nobody wants to sell on eBay anymore because they're afraid of the IRS. And I'll feel badly because I really love working with the eBay people. But I know I can still have 9 other things going on keeping me afloat. And I've been around long enough that I know it's only going to be a matter of time before that 10th thing grows back again. Some other thing will come up that will put the 10th leg on my stool. What is good about doing business this way? Well, first of all, it's diversified. You never get bored, number one. And it's probably the safest way that you can plan your career, because you are hedging your bets. That's why I call it a portfolio career. And you manage this exactly the same way that you would manage a portfolio of investments. I have my income fund, which is my law practice. It's not very exciting. I'm not looking to grow it. I'm not looking to build a firm, but it drives a pretty predictable amount of income to my bottom line each month. I have my growth and income funds, which are the books, the royalties, the speaking that I do, which brings in income, but it also has the potential for growth and opportunities. I get book deals because of my speaking, and I get speaking deals because of the books I write. There's a lot of synergy between those two things. I have my aggressive growth fund, which is the TV projects that I'm working on. These don't bring a lot of money into the mechanical banks. These do not bring a lot of money to my bottom line, but if they hit, they're going to hit so big I'll never have to work again a day in my life, from my mouth to God's ears. You plan this and you allocate your time among these various portfolios the same way that you would do an investment portfolio. Whatever your career plans are right now, and I know some of you might be looking for a job in corporate America. Some of you are probably saying, the hell with it, I want to do something different with my life. Whatever it is, your long-term goal should be to build something that looks like this eventually. Start doing it now. Whatever your current plans are, whatever you're currently planning to do with your career, get some business cards and some stationery printed up and start holding yourself out as a consultant. Start knocking on some of the local companies around here and pitching 1099 work as opposed to a job. Try that instead of that. That's a great way to start building, your portfolio career. If you have an unusual hobby, like my mechanical banks, start an eBay store. The cheapest template's only, I think, 17, 18 bucks a month. That's like a little web page within eBay, and start developing a reputation for selling a particular kind of antique, collectible, hobby supply, something on eBay. Or Amazon too. You can do it on Amazon. They have a program called FBA, which is Fulfillment by Amazon, where you send them stuff and they do all the hard stuff. They deal with all the fulfillment, all the distribution. They handle all it, and you just get a check every month. It's a really nice way to make some money. If you have an unusual hobby, by all means do it. If you have a particular area of expertise, do an ebook. It used to cost me $10,000 or more to do a print run of my books back in the early 90s when I was doing Ennico Corporation. Today, you could do an ebook for less than 200 bucks. Why not? Do an ebook, put it up on Kindle, iTunes, all these places, and then start holding yourself out as an expert, going around to corporations. I myself have done this. I have a little product that I've developed on the legal issues of social media. You know, if you have a lot of if your corporation has a lot of young employees and they're saying stuff on Facebook and LinkedIn, you know, that they shouldn't be saying, at what point can you discipline the employees for that? That's a big area of employment law right now. I put together a little interactive program, and I'm going around the country now this year speaking to big corporations, to their HR departments, on the legal ramifications of social media. Do stuff like that. Become an expert. You know, if nobody else is writing about it, well, then heck, you're just as good as anybody else. You know, do an ebook and get it out there. It doesn't cost you a lot of money like it used to, but start building something like this. Now, I'm not going to sell you on the idea that this is a stress-free life, okay? Hold on questions. I'll do questions at the end. I'm not trying to sell you on the idea that this is a stress-free life. This can be a very stressful way to make a living, especially when you're doing all the stuff that I am doing. When you're doing 10, 12 things as part of a portfolio career, time management becomes very difficult to do. And I will confess to you, there are days when I don't do it very well. I am very often guilty of the sin of trying to multitask with a Y chromosome. There should be a law banning that, frankly. People with Y chromosomes should not attempt to multitask. We simply cannot do it. Only the ladies can do it. I really do, and I violate that rule just about every day. I'm not saying, though, that you have to build something that's this complicated. You can have a very good portfolio career indeed with only 2 or 3, legs to your stool. But start building it now. Don't wait. Sooner or later, there's going to come a time when corporate America will not want you. And if you want to know why that is, you can look at one of my other YouTube videos, which is called The 4 Horsemen of Corporate America. It's on my YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com and type in Cliff Ennico, my name, you'll see this thing. If you want to know why that is, I'm not going to talk about that tonight. What I want to talk about tonight is, how do you build this? How do you build the planks? How do you figure out what the legs of the stool are going to look like that's going to support you? How do you build this thing? Well, one lesson that I have learned in my career is that the world of entrepreneurship is not as chaotic as you think it is. When people think of the world of entrepreneurship, the world beyond the corporate womb, they think of a place where crazy stuff is going on, the laws of gravity are being violated, and things just happen by chance and chaos. It's not that way at all. The world of entrepreneurship is actually very, very organized and structured. There are really only 4 paths that you can follow when you are looking to build a portfolio career similar to what I have. There are only 4 paths that you can follow. What I want to do in this presentation is I want to talk about these 4 things, and I want to talk about the pros and cons of each. What are the advantages, what are the disadvantages? There really are only 4. The good news is you don't have to limit yourself to just one of these. You can mix and match them, which is exactly what a corporate career, what a portfolio career is all about, is mixing and matching these things. But you don't have 50 flavors to choose from in this ice cream parlor. You really only have 4. Here they are. Let me put them on the board, and then I will on this pad here, and we will talk about each one. Okay? The first path, you can start a business from scratch. I mean, after all, when you think of an entrepreneur, isn't this what you think of? Right? You think of Mark Zuckerberg in his dorm room at Harvard coming up with the idea for Facebook and becoming a billionaire. Well, of course, it really didn't happen that way. If you saw The Social Network, he actually stole it from the Winklevoss twins. But let's just pretend, okay, for now. This is what you think of when you think of an entrepreneur. You think of somebody who started a business from scratch. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a big tech company kind of thing. Those of you who are looking to become consultants, and go knocking on doors looking for 1099 work from companies, you're in this box too. You're starting a consulting business from scratch. It's just you and your dog, maybe, or your cat, but it's just you. That's a startup. That's every bit as much a startup as Facebook or Twitter or any of the popular social media companies. But you don't have to be a startup person to be an entrepreneur. You can buy an existing small business. If you want to start a bagel shop, you can certainly start one from scratch and figure out how to do it. I'm sure there's a book somewhere on how to start a bagel shop. Somebody must have written it. But you don't have to. You can, if you knock around some doors, you probably will find a bagel shop somewhere in your community that's up for sale. And the owners are, for whatever reason, will be willing to sell it to you, and you can continue operating it the way they have. We'll talk about the pros and cons of that in a minute. You can buy, our third path, you can buy a franchise. Franchise businesses are different than regular businesses. When you buy a franchise, you're buying a cookbook, and you are expected to execute that cookbook in a particular location. You know, if you buy a Burger King franchise, you get an assigned territory, which is exclusive to you. They can't put another Burger King within that territory or, you know, X mile radius of where you are, but it's not really your business at all. You have to follow the cookbook that Burger King does. You can't do things that are not on the Burger King menu. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's some trade-offs involved with franchising. And then the fourth path, and this is so obvious that I think a lot of people overlook it, you can go to work for an entrepreneurial company. You know, you can go back into corporate America, but forget the big Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 corporations. Look for a company that's just getting off the ground and is starting to hire its first real management team, what I call the sweet spot. And I'll talk about the sweet spot in a few minutes, because it's a very specific thing that you're looking for when you're looking for these companies. So these are the four paths that you can follow. If you think about it, you really can't think of anything else that doesn't fall into one of these boxes. Let's talk about the boxes, though. And let's talk about the pros and cons of each. Let's start with the startup path. Starting a business from scratch. What's good about starting a business from scratch? It's your business. You make all the decisions. You know, you and if you have partners, them too. You do everything. You make all the go, no-go decisions. You decide what projects you take on, what projects you pass on. You decide when you wake up in the morning how you're going to allocate your time. You know, first 2 hours I'll do this project, then this project, then this project. This is the path of the four paths that we're going to talk about. This is the path that gives you the most freedom, is the startup path. It's your business, okay? Although I have to burst your bubble here, and I hope you don't mind. I have to drop a footnote here. A lot of people think that when they're doing the startup path or when they're an entrepreneur, that they are their own boss. You hear people use that term. You know, if I were to ask some of you, you know, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Why do you want to run your own business? Well, I want to be my own boss, right? I got to tell you that that's a myth, okay? Even as an entrepreneur, you still have a boss. It's just that the boss doesn't share the office with you. The boss doesn't live in the office with you. The boss is your customer. Okay, and everybody says this, you know, the customer's king, the customer is whatever. But when you work for yourself, you really feel it, and you feel it every day. The customer is your reason for being. You do not do what you want to do when you run your own business. You do what your customer wants you to do. And you can be a little creative in how you do it, but they're not going to pay you to do the things that you want to do, which is one of the biggest myths of entrepreneurship. They want to pay for the things that they want you to do. And it can get nasty sometimes, and it can get icky. One of the greatest myths in the entire world of entrepreneurship is that people will actually pay you to do things that are fun, exciting, interesting, and thrilling. They will not. People will not pay you for that kind of stuff, because that's the stuff they want to do themselves. What they want to pay you to do is the stuff that is tedious, boring. I mean, I'll share this with you. I'm a small business attorney, right? What does a small business attorney do? If you were to sit and look at my office and see me at work every day, what physical activity am I involved in most of every day that I'm wearing my lawyer hat and not the other 9 hats that I wear? What do you think? What does a small business attorney do?
Reading contracts.
Yeah, reading and writing contracts, absolutely. Okay, that's what I spend 90% of my time doing. How many people here think that drafting legal contracts is fun? No, it is boring as crap. It is tedious as hell. And you know what? It's also scary, because I got to get those suckers right. If I put a clause in saying thou shalt when it should be thou shalt not, my client may lose their life savings, they may lose their business, and I'm going to be faced with a whopping malpractice suit. Whenever I'm working on a contract for a client, I got one hand on my malpractice policy. It's scary stuff. I got to get it right. And when the client doesn't want you to do things the way I want to do it, I got to make sure that I get that documented, you know, so I don't get sued for malpractice down there. Well, wait a minute, Cliff, you didn't tell me. Yeah, wait a minute, I told you to put that clause in, but you told me no, you didn't want it. You know, I got to cover my butt constantly. You know, drafting contracts is scary stuff. That's why, though, I can charge lots of money for doing that, because it's scary. Seriously, fear is a great motivator. When you're looking to build a portfolio career, here, I'll share this with you. I'll share this with you. Here are Cliff Ennico's 3 steps to a successful service business. Okay? Write these down. Seriously, this is, I'm going to give you some good takeaway here. Here are 3 things. I have worked with almost 20,000 companies. I can tell you something. This works. I can't say that it works for manufacturing or retail or publishing or anything else, but for service businesses like consulting or, you know, like landscaper, you know, any kind of contractor, it works like a charm. Okay? Here are my 3 steps to a successful service business. Step 1, find a dirty job. The dirtier the better. Write this down. Sounds funny, but I swear to you it isn't. Find a dirty job. The dirtier the better. Give you a second. Step 2, that nobody wants to do but has to get done. That nobody wants to do but has to get done. Step 3, charge lots of money for doing it. Charge lots of money. No 20 bucks an hour here. Put a 0 after it. Okay? Charge a lot of money for doing it. That's my 3 steps. Seriously, follow these 3 steps. You will have a successful service business. People do not pay you to do things that are fun. Find the dirty job. Anybody here with a finance or an accounting background of any kind? Okay, you guys should be doing people tax returns. Seriously, you do not have to be a CPA or an accountant to do tax returns. And I don't care how many people there are doing it, there's always room for more. People hate that job. People hate doing that. It's tedious, it's boring, and it's scary. Don't get it right, you get audited. You wear an orange jumpsuit, right? People don't want that, right? So seriously, even if you don't consider yourself a tax pro, do some tax returns. It's a good way to start building your portfolio career. Seriously, anybody here in HR or personnel type thing, do some job consulting. Okay, do some stuff. Use your HR stuff. You know, instead of listening to lectures on LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile, tell people how to do it the right way. You don't have to be an internet social media god to do that. Just, help people out. That's people will pay for that because they want to get it right. Seriously, the best example of this I ever heard, I have to share this with you. Remember I told you I have that column, the newspaper column, people email their crazy questions. Back in 2009, in the depths of the recession, I got an email from a guy, and this guy had been a veterinarian's assistant for 40 years of his life. He'd come out of school, he worked for a local veterinarian, he'd worked for about 30, 35 years, and the vet retired, and this guy can't find a job because he's too old. They can get kids out of school to be veterinarian's assistants. They think they can't afford to give this guy what he's worth. So he was looking at the age of like 50 to being like truly unemployable, really, in a situation like that. But he had an idea for a business, which turned out to be quite brilliant. And he emailed me because he wanted to get some legal advice, okay? Here was the idea. Any pet owners here? Any pet owners here? Dogs, cats, gerbils, snakes, anything like that? Okay, the snake people, keep it to yourself, okay? Seriously, without question, what is the nastiest job you have to do when you have a pet? Without question. Clean up poop? A lot of people would think that. And I gotta tell you something, since the recession, I am working now with 4 companies that actually do going around people's houses and cleaning up poop and stuff like that. You would think that people would cut back on that in a recession, but people do not. They're actually growing, which is scary. In fact, I actually helped one of them, I can't mention names unfortunately, but I actually helped one of them come up with their slogan, "We're number 1 in the number 2 business." That was me. I came up with that, and I did not get the copyright, damn it. I should really have done that. Anyway, but I do things like that for my clients anyway, okay? But it's not cleaning up poop. There is something even worse. What's that?
If your animal is sick, making the decision.
Keep going. When your animal is sick or has to be put down. That's the answer.
Right.
Have you ever had to put down a pet? Isn't that one of life's most miserable, awful experiences? Did you see the movie Marley and Me with Owen Wilson? The last 10 minutes of the movie where he has to put Marley down, you could feel this guy's intestines just churning over. I mean, this is just, and seriously, if you've ever had it done, it's a very cold procedure, and the vets charge lots of money for that. So this guy from Altoona, this veterinarian's assistant, had an idea of creating a funeral parlor, a funeral service for pets. When it comes time to put down your pet, you call this guy up and he comes to you and he does it at home. You can either be there or not, as you choose. He tells me that it's about 50-50. Some people want to be there, holding the pet, in their arms, whatnot. He does it, of course, very painless way, very environmentally friendly, sustainable and all that. But there are people who don't want that. They want to have the memory of the living pets. What they do is they leave the pet out in the backyard, and then they're at the shelter getting the next pet while he's in the backyard whacking Fluffy. It's basically, and look, there's all kinds of people. There's no one right way to do this. So he says it's about 50-50. Some people want to be there. Some people don't want to be there. And this is it. So he started this business in 2009, and today he's doing great. He's got 3 locations, and he's thinking about franchising, is how it is. It's a matter of, now, so he did ask me, so you're probably wondering what he asked me about when he was doing this business. What kind of legal problems does a business like that have? Well, obviously, this is a business that not everybody can do. You'd have to have a vet's license or a vet's assistance license or something to be able to do this and deal with the chemicals and all the stuff you have to deal with. But I thought of something else, too. When this guy contacted me, I sent him an email saying, giving him this advice, that whenever he gets contacted by a prospective customer, do a little double checking and make sure that the person is the owner of the pet that you are being asked to kill, that you're being asked to put down. Because I have to tell you something. I live in a neighborhood around here where I have a neighbor. He's a wonderful guy. I love him to death, but he has like 3 beagles. Beagles are like hunting dogs. They bay at the moon, and he leaves them out overnight. And we've been having this, usually it's just a summertime thing, but because of the mild winter, he's been leaving them out, and they're kind of noisy. So I'm really thinking of calling this guy. He owes me a favor. You know what I'm saying? You call him up. No, he's from out of town. Nobody knows him. He comes in during the day, bada bing, goes in the backyard, bada bing, bada bong. You got to use mafia. With a business like that, you got to use mafia jokes. You have to. You can't resist that. But I'm thinking of doing like a little barter deal with this guy. You got to be careful about that. Make sure the person is actually the owner of the pet that's being asked to put down. But that's an example of what I'm talking about a successful service business. Find the dirty jobs, because that's ultimately what people are going to pay you for, and they never question the bills either. Okay, so that's what's good about starting. What's negative about starting a business? Well, it can be kind of scary, okay? When you start a business of your own, it's your business. You have to make all the decisions. Make one bad one, you might be toast, okay? This is the path that gives you the most freedom. But of the 4 paths we're going to discuss, it's also the path that is the riskiest of the 4 paths. This is where all the risk lives. My advice to all of you, if you're thinking about pursuing the startup path, don't go it alone. Build a support group. You probably have read that when you're starting a tech company, you should have a board of advisors. Okay? That's not just for tech companies. Every small business should have a board of advisors. From people that you just call. You don't have to meet regularly. I actually belong to one. There's 6 of us. We're all solo lawyers. We all work out of our homes in the greater Bridgeport, Connecticut area. We're all in different specialties. We don't compete with one another. But once every couple of months, we get together. Usually it's at a Chinese restaurant or a deli, someplace cheap. And we go around the table. We talk about things we're doing in our offices, not mentioning names. And we try to help each other out, help make some of the tough decisions that you have to make. Give yourself that. I call it a reality check. When you were working in corporate America, you could always, if you got stuck on something or if you had a problem, you could always go to the person in the cubicle down the hall or take them out to lunch or whatever. Keep that going. That's probably the only reason I can think of to join a networking group. I'll be very honest with you. If you join a networking group to get business, it may happen, it may not. In my experience, it doesn't happen an awful lot. But networking groups are great for meeting your advisor group, for finding the people who will be on your board of advisors. Don't pick people that are doing the same thing that you are doing. Pick people who are serving the same customers that you are. So if you're selling high-end jewelry, starting at $5,000, $10,000 and up, designer jewelry, somebody who should be on your board of advisors is the local Mercedes BMW dealer. Now, you're not in any way, those are 2 very different businesses, but what do they both have in common? You're selling to high-income people in that community. So that's what you want to look for. You want to look for people who are dealing with the same kinds of issues, dealing with the customers that you are. Not necessarily the people that are doing the same thing. And networking groups are a great place to find those people. Just don't go there looking for business. It might happen. I'm not saying it never happens, but you're better off looking for significant others who'll be part of your reality check team. Okay? Because I'll tell you, when you work for yourself, especially when you work alone like I do, out of your house, There's a disease that happens after a while. You start thinking that every idea that pops into your head is a work of sheer genius. And let me tell you, 95% of the time, you are wrong about that. And you need somebody to tell you about that. And if your spouse is not the kind of person, my spouse personally is the kind who will tell me that that's just a rat's awful idea. But not everybody has a spouse like that. So it's good to have that reality check. People, well, Cliff, that's interesting, but have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? They'll do it in a more politically correct way, and it won't jeopardize your marriage. Okay, that's starting a business from scratch. Let's talk now about buying a small business. What's good about buying a small business as opposed to starting one from scratch? Less risky. That's the biggest advantage here. You don't have to worry about where to put the business. If it's like a retail or a storefront, it's already there. It's already got a location. It has a following. And usually, by the way, you don't have to sign a new lease with the landlord. You can actually assume whatever is left on the seller's existing lease and just continue to run it out to full term. So you know exactly how much you're going to pay for rent. Maybe the landlord will want an additional month's security deposit or something like that, but you know exactly what the rent's going to be. There's no mystery, there's no surprises there. The business has employees, and some of them you want to keep because the customers like them. The business has suppliers. You don't have to worry if it's a bagel shop. You don't have to worry about where the bagel dough is going to come from. This truck pulls up every morning. Now, maybe you want to change those relationships somewhat, but you don't have to worry about it. You can just take over the business and just continue the next day as if nothing ever happened. Best of all, the business has customers. And for a bagel shop or a restaurant or a pizza place, the turnover is not going to be all that great. You're not going to have a lot of customer attrition. I live in a town nearby. I've been living there since 1985 now, so 31 years I've been living in this town. And in all that time, I would probably guess that I've bought maybe 95% of my pizzas from one pizza place. There's one pizza place that I always go to for my pizza. Okay? People have a lot of loyalty when it comes to pizza places and fast food and stuff like that. They always go to the same place. I just learned recently that in the 30 years that I've been living in this town, that pizza parlor has changed ownership 4 times. And I didn't know. I didn't care. Pizza still tastes good. I mean, I'd seen new people there. I figured, the owner's got the kids home from college or something like that. I didn't realize it, but I didn't care. Do you, as long as the pizza's good, do you really care that there's somebody new standing behind the cash register? You don't care. You'll stick with it. And for most restaurant-type businesses, that probably will be the case. People are incredibly, how can I say it? People have a lot of inertia when it comes to their bagel and coffee in the morning. They'll always go to the same place, okay? So that isn't always universally true, but for most of those kind of businesses, it will. Even better, you can actually look at the seller's financial statements. You get a non-disclosure agreement with the seller, and he'll share with you his tax returns, financial statements, let you talk to his accountant. You can know exactly how the business is doing, what the numbers are, how long it's going to take you to recoup your investment. You know all of that going in, which you don't know up here when you're starting a business from scratch. That's why I say that buying a business is less risky than starting a business from scratch. So, hey, sounding pretty good, right? But now let's talk about the downside. What's the negatives of buying the business? Still pretty risky. It's less risky than starting a business, but it's still pretty risky. Let's talk about those customers, okay? If you're talking about a restaurant, you're probably not going to lose too many customers going in. But there is one exception to that, by the way, and you got to be careful about this. If you're going to change something, if you don't like what the seller is doing and you want to change some things, when you take over the business, do it carefully. I had a client a couple of years ago who bought an Italian deli in a town near here, and he was Hispanic. He was from the Dominican Republic, the DR, in the Caribbean, and there was a major influx of Dominican and people from Latin America coming into this community, and he wanted to set up a deli for these people with Caribbean dishes, Latin American dishes, actually wonderful stuff. If you've never had this kind of food before, you got to try it. It's marvelous stuff. Okay, he wanted to take this Italian deli and convert it into a Dominican, Caribbean deli, which was a very smart move because of the demographic changes that were taking place at that time. Okay. The mistake he made, the day after the closing, he changed the entire menu. He stopped making the Italian stuff. His customers would come in the next day, everything's in Spanish. There's pictures of dishes up there they'd never seen before. Scared the heck out of people. People don't like change that rapidly. They don't. So his sales went from like this in 30 days. In 30 days, he went from having, about 1,000 active customers to having hardly any. Now that situation reversed itself after a while as he did his marketing within the Latin American community and people started coming in and who recognized the food and who knew what it was. That situation turned around, but he had 3 or 4 months where he had almost zero cash flow. He was hitting his credit cards, his lines of credit. He had to use it just to keep the doors open for 3 or 4 months, which if he had done it more slowly and gradually, he would have kept at least some of those customers long enough to even out the transition period. If you're going to make changes to a business, when you buy it, do it slowly, gradually, and incrementally. Don't do it too quickly because you will have customer attrition if that happens. Okay. The other exception here is a personal service business. Forget bagel shops and delis. Let's say that we're talking now about buying a plumbing business or a law practice, a professional practice, okay? Let's say that one of you was a lawyer, you wanted to buy my law practice, right? For 35 years, I've been answering the phone myself. Now, you call the law offices of Cliff Ennico, total stranger answers the phone. Are you going to lose some clients? Yeah, I think you will. In fact, they tell me, I actually have some friends at the Medical Association here in Connecticut who tell me that on average, when a doctor, an older doctor, retires and sells his practice to a younger doctor who's just starting out, the practice often loses as many as 50 to 60% of its patients in the first year alone. That's how big the customer attrition can be. Have any of you here have had a doctor retire in the last couple of years? Okay. How many of you, by a show of hands, how many of you stayed with the new doctor? How many of you left and went to another doctor? Okay, it's almost exactly half and half. 2 people over here and 2 people over there. It's a 50-50, so there's my proof right there, okay? So what does that mean? If you're gonna buy a personal service business where you're likely to have a lot of customer attrition just because you're not the person that the seller was, don't pay a lot of money up front. The way you do a business like that, you pay a very small amount, 10, 20, 30,000 up front, and then what you do is you give the seller a royalty on your sales for the next few years. You actually have him print out a list of all his current customers, patients, clients, whatever, and you actually attach it as an exhibit to the sale document, and then you put a clause in the agreement that says that, okay, I'm paying you this much up front for the next 5 years, every quarter, any sales that I make to these people, the people on his list, he gets 10, 15, 20% of the gross sales. Give him what you're doing here is you're giving him an incentive to hang out with you and stick around and help manage the transition to keep that attrition as low as possible because it benefits him. That's what you're doing. His success, his retirement money is going to depend on you not losing a lot of customers, and he'll stick around and help you to make sure that that doesn't happen if he knows that his payment is tied to that. Now, any new business that you bring in, that's yours. If you want, you can give them a royalty on all sales, but I don't in my documents. What I usually do in my deals is I limit it only to those people that were the seller's customers. Any new business that you bring in, that's yours, and you keep 100% of that. But anything that he gave you, you get it, and then after 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, then that goes away too, and everything's yours. That's how a royalty deal is structured. If you're buying a personal service business, that's what you're going to do. Okay, the second bad thing about buying a business, which still makes it very risky, let's talk now about those financial statements. Remember I said you could look at the financial statements, right? But what's the one fault, even the best prepared financial statements in the world, prepared by the best accounting firm in the world, has a flaw. They have a problem. When you're looking at the numbers on a financial statement, what do those numbers represent? What do those numbers reflect? Past performance, history. You're looking at the past. You're walking down I-95 backwards. You can see perfectly where you've been, but you haven't a clue what's coming at you. That's the problem with financial statements, even the best ones in the world. A business may have been doing very well for 30, 40 years, but there may be things going on in that community that are going to cause the business to change, the performance to change. And the seller is not obligated to tell you about that. If you buy a house, the seller has to tell you if there's termites, but that's not the case when you buy a business. It's strictly buyer beware. You got to ask a lot of questions. I sometimes tell my clients if they're buying a business in a town that they don't know all that well, take a couple of weeks off, rent a motel room, and hang out there for a couple of weeks. Read the local newspapers. Make sure the police, always check in with the police, make sure that they know you're there. You're not a pervert or anything like that. Just make sure it's a good precaution. But spend some time and find out what's going on. Go to the local library, like where we are right now, and talk to the little old men that are hanging out near the coffee machine. They know everything. They're the town gossips. They're the Statler and Waldorf of that town, and they can tell you all kinds of incredible things that are going on. What are some of the things you need to look at? Demographic shifts. Demographic shifts. Populations change. When I moved into my hometown of Fairfield 30 years ago, the average age was about 50, 55. Today, the average age is like 30. We have a big influx of young professionals who are moving up from New York and who can't afford to live in the lower part of Fairfield County, so they're moving into Fairfield and Bridgeport, and they're changing everything. We have to build whole new schools. We got to do all this. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that if you're buying a business in that town, you've got to kind of know what that demographic shift means. If you're looking to do, say, an educational toy store, like a Zany Brainy, Fairfield would be a great place right now for you to do. If you're looking to do a senior care business, however, I'm not so sure that Fairfield's the best place. There are probably other towns here in Fairfield County where that are probably better for that kind of a business. Watch out for demographics. Look especially here in the Northeast for businesses moving out of town. And boy, what a great day to talk about this. Some of you know GE just announced this afternoon that it's moving its corporate headquarters from Fairfield, Connecticut to Boston. That's going to have a major, major impact on a lot of things in that town. And if you're not from Fairfield, if you're buying a business in Fairfield and you don't know that, you could have a really nasty surprise with something like that. Always make sure, whenever you buy a business, that there's somebody on your team who has local knowledge, who knows what's going on in the town, and who can tell you about some of these shifts that are going on in things. Okay, less risky than starting a business, but still fairly risky. Let's move on to buying a franchise. What's good about buying a franchise? Less risky than either buying a business or starting a business of your own. Okay, when you buy a franchise, you are buying into a formula that has been proven successful. Generally speaking, companies do not franchise unless they have 10, 15, 20 outlets already on the ground. They know how this works. It's all being done under a trademark and a brand. They do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. When you buy a franchise, let's say it's a restaurant franchise, like a fast food outlet, a burger place or something like that. You know, once you plunk down your money to buy the franchise, you go out to their corporate headquarters and you spend 6 to 8 weeks in a classroom going through their operations manual, which is usually a set of loose leaf notebooks about this thick, and there's usually 4 or 5 of them. They teach you everything you need to know to run that business, from how to make the burgers, how to hire people, how to use the point of sale software, how to advertise, where to advertise. They tell you everything that you have to know. While this is going on, while you are doing your franchise training, they have real estate people who are actually checking out with commercial real estate brokers here and trying to find your location. They'll help you find your location, so you don't make a mistake about that. Okay, demographically, you want to be on the east side of town rather than the west side of town. Don't like that strip mall, not enough parking, they're much better off over here. They'll point you in the right direction so you don't make mistakes there. They also will help you with your grand opening. Most of them have a 24/7 toll-free hotline, so if you forget some of your training, you can call them and get advice. And even if they cannot help you, you have all your neighboring franchisees. If they're part of the same system, they're not your competitors. They're not. You are expected to contact them and talk to each other. The UPS stores, they used to be mailboxes, etc. I understand that here in Fairfield County, they all talk to each other. In fact, they help each other out. If somebody gets sick, they can call a neighboring franchisee and they'll have one of his employees come over and run the store until the person gets better. They actually have monthly meetings. It's almost like they have a little union going on, although the franchise sanctions it. It's not a problem. So if the franchise is doing something that they don't like, they can go and talk to the franchise as a united front. I always tell people that when you buy a franchise, it's a lot like joining a street gang that makes money. Remember the Jets song from West Side Story? When you're a Jet and the crap hits the fan, you've got brothers around, you're a family man. I can't sing worth crap. But that's what it's about. You're not going in alone. You're part of a team. In fact, people will tell you, experts will tell you, franchise businesses tend to fail much less often than standalone small businesses that are not franchised. So if you're looking to hedge your downside, if you got like a lump sum, severance payment from your former employer and you don't want to blow it at the track, a franchise is a fairly safe bet if you're buying a franchise. Not all franchises are, but it's a safer bet than doing either of two things. Well, Cliff, this is great. Why didn't you start with this? Why'd you bore me with all this crap? You should have gone right to this. This is what I want. Well, hold on. Okay, franchising is not for everybody. When you buy a franchise, you are buying the 3 S's, safety, security, support, but you pay a very large price for that. What you pay is your freedom. When you buy a Burger King franchise, you do not have it your way. The customer does, but you don't, okay? When you buy a franchise, and especially a restaurant franchise, you must adhere to their rules and regulations. At the end of the day, and some of those rules and regulations can be very strict and very tight, and they don't give you a lot of room to maneuver. At the end of the day, franchises are all about uniformity and consistency. What they're trying to do is build a national brand. When you go to a Burger King in Bangor, Maine, you get exactly the same burger, the same experience as a Burger King in San Diego and every place in between. And when things change, so some of you know the McDonald's chain now, they're going to doing the breakfast 24/7, and they're doing more salads and chicken and healthy stuff. If you're a McDonald's franchisee, you cannot opt out of that. You have to go along with whatever corporate tells you to do. And you have to do it fairly quickly and spend the money without any insurance. Let's face it, you have to buy the rotisseries, learn how to do chicken, train your employees to do chicken. When McDonald's went to the 24/7 breakfast, they had a lot of problems because now they had to have a griddle that is solely devoted to breakfast, because some people don't like to mix that stuff, with the dinner stuff. It's been an awful transformation, and a lot of the franchisees are not happy about this, but they got to go along. They're part of the system. You cannot opt out. I always tell people that when you buy a franchise, it's exactly halfway between working for yourself and working for somebody else. You do have your territory, your outlet. You are responsible for profit and loss for that particular outlet, but it's not your business. It's their business, and you're just executing the cookbook in this community. If you want to make changes, you can, up here, you can, let's say, for example, you got a barber shop, a hair salon, and you decide you want to put a TV set in the lobby so kids can watch cartoons on Saturday morning. If you're up here or here, you just do it. You buy the TV set and you install it. Down here, you got to ask for permission. And very often they'll say no, not because they don't think it's a good idea, but they don't want to have to install it system-wide. They'll say, hey, great idea, Cliff. You got a good idea here, but you know what? Let's wait a while on this. I don't think we're really ready to launch that for the entire franchise system. When we get to that point, it's a good idea, pat, pat, pat. Thank you for the suggestion, but we're going to wait because we want everybody looking the same. We don't want people looking different within the franchise system. Remember, it's all about uniformity and consistency. So those are the good things and the bad things about franchising. Not for everybody. You can be too entrepreneurial for a franchise. If you're the kind of person where if somebody throws you a project, you can think of 10 ways to make it better, that makes a terrible franchisee. That is not what they want. They don't want people that are going to tell them how to run the business. They want people who give them a crisp yes, sir, and go do the duty of the job that has to be done. That's what they're looking for. Military, I find myself using a lot of military analogies when I talk about franchising. It's a lot like joining the Army. You have a certain ability to maneuver within your rank, but you can't jump to the next rank. It's the same kind of thing. Last but not least, working for an entrepreneurial company. Some people don't think this is entrepreneurship at all, or self-employment, and I would probably agree with them. Here, you're still staying in corporate America. You're going back to corporate America, but in a different kind of company. You're not going back into big Pfizer, GE, the big Fortune 1000 corporations. You're going into a company that's just getting off the ground and is looking for its first professional management team. It's a dirty little secret, but it is true in just about every company I've ever worked for. Initially, when a company gets started, it's run by the founders. The founders do everything. They cook the hamburgers, they do everything, they do the books, they do the marketing. But if there comes a point where a business can no longer be run by those people, what they have to do is they have to put systems in place and hire people to manage the systems that keep the business going when a company grows to a certain point. That's what I call the sweet spot. When a company run by its founders is looking for its first professional management team, and believe it or not, they look for people from corporate America, because you have that experience working at the larger level, which they themselves do not. At least if they're smart, they recognize that they do not. Okay, let's talk about the sweet spot. What is the sweet spot? I'll give you a very, very strict definition. A company in the sweet spot is a company that is 1 to 3 years in operation. You don't want to work for a startup. Startups are too volatile. Half the time the ideas don't pan out, the paychecks don't clear the bank. Not a good place to be, especially if you're working 80, 90 hours a week, which you probably will. I'll talk about that later. You want a company that's 1 to 3 years in existence, that has proven its technology, and that has revenue. You don't really care so much about profit. There are a lot of very good companies in the sweet spot that are not yet profitable, but there's got to be revenue. People have to be buying the product or service. You don't want to take technology risk, and you don't want to take market risk. Those two things have to be in place. Number 4, the company should have had at least one round of seed capital from a venture firm. You want to know that venture capitalists, investors are buying this company, okay? The company is still being run by the founders, but they want to bring on their first professional management team. That's the key part of this. That's what I call the sweet spot, where somebody like you can really add some value to an early stage company. What's good about working for a startup company? It's a great way to expand your resume. Okay, if you're working for a company in the sweet spot, you are not going to be the number 3 SAP infrastructure manager. You're going to be the chief marketing officer. You're not going to be the EEOC specialist. You're going to be the VP of HR. You're taking a move here from middle management to senior management. And I have seen it happen. I haven't seen it a lot in the last few years, but I have seen it happen where a person will make what I call a trampoline career move, where they come out of corporate America at a mid-level, they go to work for a smaller company for a few years at a more senior level, and then bounce into corporate America again at a more senior level because they can function now at that level. Can be scary because you're going to be spending a lot of time learning things that you didn't know how to do when you were mid-level management, but as long as you can do the key things well, you generally will, they'll cut you some slack. They'll give you a chance to learn the things that you don't know. To pick up, at least most early stage companies, as long as you can. So for example, if you're in HR, the one thing you have to be able to do extremely well is fire people in such a way that they don't sue the company. That's the key. If you can do that, if you can tell somebody to go to hell in such a way that they actually look forward to the trip, you have a future in HR at a sweet spot company. The benefits, the strategic benefits planning and all that, you can learn down the road. But that's the one thing you got to be able to do. And you'll learn this after a while. Okay? Another good thing about working for a sweet spot company, you can get filthy rich here in a way that you never could in corporate America. Anybody who ever played Monopoly as a kid, you don't get rich on the $200 that you get every time you go around the board, right? You get rich on your equity. And that's what a sweet spot company, your richest part of your compensation is going to be options, restricted stock. This is how you get rich. You all know that when Microsoft went public, all the secretaries became millionaires because all of the stock that they own. This is what happens when a sweet spot company hits, okay? And it hits big. Okay, now, that's what's good about it. What's bad about working for a small company? You're going to work like a galley slave. You are. Because remember, these are companies that are backed by venture capital. Venture capitalists are not long-term investors. They are not looking to build a legacy company that's going to be around in 100 years. They're looking to make an investment and get their money out in 3, 5, 7 years, tops. And there's only 2 ways that result can be achieved. Either the company goes public and launches an IPO, or it gets sold out to a bigger company in an acquisition, in an M&A transaction. Those are the only 2 ways that happens. Everybody that is working at that company is working 24/7, 365 to make sure that happens within the time frame. That's what you're doing. You are going to work harder than you probably ever did in corporate America, but with a chance of a much bigger payout if the company hits and either goes public or sells out to a much bigger company. That's when everybody gets rich and all the gold falls from the sky and everybody never has to work a day in their lives again. That's what they're all looking to do. Okay, everybody with me on that? Okay, another bad thing about working about this kind of a company, entrepreneurs, I got to tell you something. I love them. I've devoted my life to them, but some of them, forgive me, can be the worst assholes you have ever worked for in your life. And now, forgive me, I see some of you smiling. Hey, dude, you didn't know the company where I was. It isn't just the entrepreneurs. They're all over. I totally get that. Trust me. Even in corporate America, you do find these people. But when you get into the entrepreneurial world, it gets magnified by a factor of 100. Okay. Here, if you doubt me, if you think I'm being cynical, picture in your mind a successful man or woman who has built a $50 million company from scratch. Picture that person. Now, tell me, what kind of an ego do you think that person has? Off the charts. They will ask you to do things that are crazy. They will ask you to do things that are beneath your dignity. Okay? These are the people that call me at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night with a question, and they expect me to return the call that same night. Okay, it's not just the employees. The outside contractors like me get hit with this too. These are people who don't have social graces, they don't have social skills. All they know is that they are focused and dedicated on getting this done, reaching this result. Their name is on the door. So when they see you leaving at 7 o'clock at night because of a family emergency, they take that personally. They take that as a personal affront and a sign of disloyalty. Normal people don't see it that way, but they do. You're dealing with a different kind of animal here. They've actually done neuroscience studies, believe it or not. The brainwave things where they expose you to stimuli and different parts of the brain light up. You ever see about these kind of research? They have done a lot of research on entrepreneurs, and they find a very high degree of correlation between entrepreneurs and serial killers. The same sort of things that stimulate a serial killer are the same things that this is disturbing information. It really is. But these are people who just don't, they're sociopaths, and entrepreneurs have a lot in common. And if you've ever read a biography of famous entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, the Walter Isaacson biography, there's a lot of that correlation too. These were vicious people to work for. How many of you here would have wanted to work for Steve Jobs? Even though you know how that story ended up and everybody who worked for him became rich, how many of you would put up with the crap that he put his employees through? You got to think about that when you're working for a sweet spot company. The last thing I want to say about the sweet spot company, and then we'll wrap up, is unfortunately there aren't that many of them in the Northeast, especially in the tech field. If you are looking to work for a startup technology company, a company that's going to be on the front page of Entrepreneur magazine in a few years, the pickings around here are not that great. There are some isolated pockets. So for example, in the Albany, New York area, for those of you who are interested in nanotechnology, you know what that is? That's the microscopic robots. Albany, New York has become kind of an epicenter for that kind of research because of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. A lot of that is based on research that was developed there. In the Route 128 corridor around Boston, you have a lot of the financial software companies, the companies that do the software that make the big banks and insurance companies run. But for most people, if you're really looking to get involved with the sweet spot technology company, you're probably going to have to look south by southwest. Texas, Oklahoma, Arizona, Colorado, Utah. This is where these companies tend to be in a lot of cases. You may find that you have to live in a red state for a couple of years, to do this. But again, if the payoff is there, you do it. And also, too, you might be able to cut a deal where you don't have to actually be at the company headquarters. You can work remotely and just fly out once a month for the board meetings. You might be able to cut a deal like that with this if they really want you. I mean, I actually did this. I'll share this with you. Back in the late 90s, I answered an ad. A local software company was looking for a general counsel. And I'd done a lot of software work. So I interviewed for the job, and the CEO and I just fell in love with each other. I mean, I could do everything that he needed done, hands down. Okay, the problem was they were only offering $35,000 a year for this job. And even back then, you can't live on $35,000 a year in Southern Connecticut. So I cut a deal with him. I figured, it's clear, he likes me, I like him, so let's try to cut a deal here. I said, look, here's the deal. For $35,000 a year, here's what I'll do. I'll give you 1 day a week, okay? I'll come to work for you 12 to 14 hours a day, W-2, taxes withheld, the whole bit. I will be your general counsel 1 day a week, for $35,000 a year. I'll work 12 to 14 hours a day. I won't do anything else while I'm on company time. If whatever doesn't get done in that time frame, either I will do it the following week when I show up, or I'll take it home and I'll do it in my law practice for a third of my hourly rate. I'll charge, at the time I was charging $200 an hour, I offered him $75 an hour for legal work. You find a lawyer who's willing to work for $75 an hour on sophisticated contract work. It does not exist. And I did this. He accepted the deal. He sold his board on it, and for 5 years, I was vice president and general counsel of this company, Fridays by appointment only. That was the deal that I cut with him. Okay, so you can cut these deals. You can cut deals with sweet spot companies that you can't cut with the Fortune 500. Okay, so let's wrap up. These are the four paths. If you look at them, do you see that there are relationships between them, by the way? I just want to point this out, and then we're done, okay? As you go from number 1 to number 4, 2 things happen. As you go from startup to working for an entrepreneurial company, things become less and less risky. Do you see this? Up here is where all the risk is. Down here, you're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks, and it clears the bank just like your old paycheck did when you were in corporate America. That's the first thing that happens. The second thing, though, that happens is as you go down the chart, your freedom shrinks. Down here, you're going to be working harder than you've ever worked before for half the money that you were making in corporate America. Up here is where all the freedom is, okay? We actually have a word for that. We call it the entrepreneurial trade-off, freedom versus risk. If what you value most in life is freedom, you're going to balance your portfolio career more at this end of the spectrum than down here. If the thought of risk makes you gag, if the thought of being a risk taker is just anathema to you, well, you can still have an entrepreneurial career. Outside of corporate America, it just means that you're balancing your portfolio career more at this end of the chart rather than up here. That's why I recommend a portfolio career. Because with a portfolio career, you can balance these things. You can do a startup, do a little consulting business, maybe buy a little business on the side, run it with some family members, maybe do a Subway or something which you run with family members, do a little part-time work, a little temp work for a company. You can do these things, and manage your risk portfolio so that your risk versus freedom so that you have the best of all possible worlds. That's why I suggest the career of the future is not just one thing. One of the biggest lies you have been sold is that your resume only has to say one thing. I've got a resume that has 12 things on it. It's an ugly, ugly, long resume. But I'll tell you something. I am making more money than I ever made working in corporate America or in large law firms. I won't share numbers with you, but I have no trouble at all paying off my mortgage on a house in Fairfield, Connecticut. If I had kids, sadly I don't, I could send them to Ivy League colleges, with what I am making doing this. Okay? I am having the time of my life, despite the time management challenges, and the best part of a portfolio career, no one will ever put me in a room like this ever again, unless I'm the one giving the talk. No one will ever put you in a transition situation again with this. If that doesn't sell you, I don't know what will. That's all I have to say, guys. Thank you very much.